I'm Dr. Vanessa Sinclair, and this is Rendering Unconscious. My guest today is Jason Haaf, a writer and editor living in Brooklyn, New York. His previous works have been featured in Hello Mister and Warren Brothers magazines. He is the author of 2 novellas, Love Case and Locked Up Boy. His latest work, Bent Book, is a queer-themed anthology and is available now. Proceeds from Bent Book go to the Marsha P. Johnson Institute and the Audre Lorde Project. Jason Haaf contributed poetry to Rendering Unconscious, the book, Rendering Unconscious, Psychoanalytic Perspectives, Politics, and Poetry, 2019, available from Trapart Books. That's TRAPART.net. You can follow Jason Haaf at Haafwit on Instagram. That's HAAFWIT. Links to everything can be found in the text accompanying this episode. You can support the podcast by visiting our Patreon, patreon.com/VANESSA23CARL. Your support is greatly appreciated.
When I originally thought of Bent Book, I wanted to which was not last January, or this past January, which seems like 8 years ago. But I wanted to basically put together like a queer anthology, because I just sort of felt it was lacking a little bit right now. I don't really know of like any really popular like queer journals outside of like zines maybe. So I wanted to just try and put something together. That was in January. So then I just sort of put out a call for like submissions to get everything in by late April. So I had like quite a bit in like the first couple of months. And then in mid-March, that's when COVID like really hit New York, and really like the US. And that's sort of, in a way, it gave me more time to put it together at home, because I wasn't going to be working. It did sort of slow down the submission process because I think everything really, especially in New York, it just felt like it was very much in like disarray. So I also didn't want to like I called for the submissions, but I didn't want to drill it because I knew everyone was sort of kind of figuring out what they're going to do for a living, really. And this is also like before stimulus checks and like any of that. So it was basically everyone's just like, I'm unemployed. But it did give me more time to read everyone's entries a lot more and like spend time with it, which I was grateful for. I bought a typewriter. It was like a vintage typewriter from 1975. So I hand typed everything. So I like really got to know it. I felt like each story I was sort of like inside because I was forced to spend so much time with it. One, being at home, 2, typing it, which kind of like I had to get to know my own anxiety with a typewriter because it's different. Like if you make a mistake, you just make a mistake. So that was in March. Then I got together as much as I felt like I needed at that time, especially like lengthwise. So then it went to print the last week of May, which was also the week that George Floyd was murdered. So then it's like the world changed again after that. And then I had already planned to donate the funds or the profits from Bent Book. I was already going to donate them to the Marsha P. Johnson Institute, which benefits Black trans women. And after the Black Lives Movement really blew up this time, then it felt like more important to do that. And in the beginning I was kind of like, should I put this out right now? Is this the right time? Like I was questioning not my motive with it, but like my execution with it. But then I ultimately was like, wait a second, if I can sell this and donate money, that's the point of this. So I split all of the proceeds between Marsha P. Johnson Institute and the Audre Lorde Project. So then that's almost like what it sort of became. It was helping me raise money. So it's sort of like the journey of Bent Book, which went from like, I was staying at a hotel in upstate when I thought of it, which was like this quiet, sort of like secluded world. And then like COVID, and then the Black Lives Movement really took charge in a way that it hadn't before. So it was like Bent Book was changing with everything else. So yeah, it's sort of like been on its own journey.
I love it. Well, and it's Bent Book, so it kind of makes sense that the journey's been bent. And I love that even the envelope you sent it in is typed.
Yeah, I wanted to like really use that typewriter as best I could.
Have you tried doing any like stream of consciousness typing?
No. I mean, I should.
You should try it.
Yeah.
Who do you think of when you think of queer writers typing away in a room?
I don't know. I had this like weird visual of, I don't know. I pictured someone who I guess like resembled like a gay man in like the 50s in this sort of like bare room typing. And the weird thing is like, so now we're going on like stream of consciousness here. I used to work at this hotel called the Colony in Florida, and they have a location in Kennebunkport, Maine. And I stayed there, this was like 10, 15 years ago. And I stayed there to do, I guess I was doing something in accounting, but my room was like, it was really pretty. It overlooked the ocean. It had super like old wallpaper, and everything was wooden, and had this old wooden desk. And I took, this is like before selfies were even a thing, which is funny, but I took like a picture of myself at the desk, and I think that's the image that it just like stayed in my brain. So then I just, in my head, I kind of just put a typewriter in front of it. So that's what I was sort of picturing when I was making it.
I love that. That's perfect. When I was still in New York, I used to take the train upstate and go stay in this like collective that like grew herbs. Like it was like a lavender farm kind of communal collective. You could like Airbnb rooms there for like $40 a night. Mm-hmm. And it was amazing. You could see the stars, and I have like a portable typewriter. So it was like lug my portable typewriter up there and like turn everything off and just do like stream of consciousness typing.
That would be cool to do with the sound. I feel like the sound combined with the stream of consciousness thing would be different.
Totally. I love the typewriter sound, but yeah, it's a commitment.
Yeah.
When you write on a typewriter.
And with Bent Book, what I had to do, well, actually Kyle, my husband, he's the one who really did it, but any mistake that I made, I didn't go back with like whiteout or anything. We had to fix it in Photoshop. So he actually played like a really big part in the layout of it, because there's a lot to fix. And my typing was fun, like it was all right. But as far as like just like correcting everything, getting all the margins in place, that was all through Photoshop. So it's like fixing like a period would take like 2 minutes as opposed to 2 seconds.
Having to retype the whole thing.
Yeah.
When I was in high school, I actually did my papers on a typewriter.
Really? that,
Yeah, I
that's,
think I'm like the
I feel
last
like I should.
generation. I'm like
That's
just
like not surprising.
that much older, that age, where like I had like a word processing typewriter where like it could save like a line before the line came out, but that was about it.
Huh.
I had like a
Yeah.
rich friend who had a computer, and it had AOL, and we used to like go in chat rooms, and it was like 99 cents a minute. Those were the days. And her dad used to always get very mad at us for being in the chat rooms for 99 cents a minute. Did you want to tell me about some of the authors in your book?
Yeah. I mean, they sort of they come from all over. I mean, there's a few from Brooklyn and New York. I wanted Bent Book to be. I wanted the content to be diverse. Some of the poetry reads like more traditional poetry. Some of it does not. But yeah, the authors, I mean, there's an author who's like an LGBT educator that lives in India, some in New York. One of them I knew in college, and we hadn't really, I mean, I guess we've been following each other at some point on social media. But he wrote the piece called Florida Possessions, which I really liked because I wanted a little bit of Florida in there too. So I wanted to like get some geography in there.
And the roots.
But yeah, I mean, it was really nice getting the submissions and being able to share other people's words that I know for myself as a writer, like I don't really know like where to go with it because I don't really know where or what is going to publish words that are very queer or very sexual or just like raw. So I was happy to just sort of provide a place for that.
Uncensored.
Right. I think that's like the biggest thing. And that's sort of like, that was my aim with it. I did want it uncensored. And I mean, the one piece, it's called Fissures, pronouncing that word. It's by this author, Justin Dewey. And to me, it reads almost like a call to arms about, it's about sexual assault. But the way that it reads is like, it reminds me of something that you would read from like the 70s or something. And I purposely did not make the punctuation perfect. And I wanted it kind of rambling. And I wanted it like a little bit messy. And I don't know like really of an example where you can kind of like do that without having like an editor that might be trying to either tone it down a little bit or make it like quote unquote correct. So, I mean, there was like a bit of editing that I did, but a lot of it I just didn't see something as like right or wrong, and I wanted it to feel sort of like free, I guess.
Yeah, I know. I really feel like, well, of course, censorship, but just editing in general, especially over editing. I just feel like the best art and writing is not edited much. It's just like, that's why I love like stream of consciousness, and that's why I love the cut-ups, and just that's why I love making art like in a day and just like getting it out, because I feel like the raw emotions and the raw self is so much more interesting, and I think that's what really gets people attracted to work. And like, speaking of like, you know, queer writers or typewriters, like the beats, that's what they were all about, was like just getting it out of them. Jack Kerouac with his like endless roll of writing, and then Burroughs, of course, cutting everything up and just throwing pages around the room, and then they just assembled it like however, because they didn't really know how the book went, you know.
Yeah. Well, what's like funny is like now that I'm thinking about Bent Book, I'm like, okay, taking out like everything that's been especially going on in the United States. But I was like, where was I mentally when I started like thinking of this? And I was reading a lot of John Rechy, who wrote City of Night, which is like I didn't know of him beforehand. I've since gotten one of his quotes tattooed.
Oh, is that who that
um,
is? Nice.
but City of Night really was like the first graphic novel about like queer life, and he took it from his own life, um, about the New York underground, whether it was with like gay men or drag queens, drug users. It was, no one had really written about that in an uncensored way. Um, and I just kind of attached to that time. Um, it was easy to picture, and then it's like you forget that like there wasn't other work out um, detailing that. So he was like a pretty big inspiration. Yeah.
Awesome. We'll have to link to that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know. And all of this, like, that's the thing that's so amazing now with the internet and how accessible everything is that like all of this was really hard to find really not that long ago. And you really couldn't find anything written, and it was censored or illegal,
Mm-hmm.
considered pornography.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, and then I like earlier in the year, I just developed this like weird relationship with things in the 70s. Whether it was like the Typewriter or like a John Rechy novel, and then I started watching uh like early Martin Scorsese movies, and there is just something, or like John Cassavetes, and there's just something like during that time that like I really connected to, and it was this sort of like everything for that, to me, like during that 10-year period, kind of felt more like a documentary, or like a documentary style, or it was just like a little bit more gritty. Or if you watch like a film, it's like the actresses, like whether like Ellen Burstyn, for an example, or Gina Rowlands, they didn't have like perfect hair and makeup, and they were made to look more like everyday people and like messy and sloppy. And so there's something about the sort of like the grittiness of it. And then, but then when I think of like the 80s, in large part when everything became costume, and it was just like hair, makeup, clothes, shoulders, it sort of was like the antithesis of that. So that was, I don't know, that's just a constant, I guess, inspiration for me.
Nice.
Yeah.
And it's also, I don't know, whenever I think of the 70s New York, it's like before New York got totally like gentrified and sanitized. And like that started really in the 80s. And the
Mm-hmm.
same people that did that to New York are now screwing up the whole country,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And it was just like, whether it was like closing down like queer safe places or clubs, or like movie theaters, and it was like sort of Disneyfying it, um, and like the whole Reagan era, which was like pretty awful, and like sanitizing everything. It's, you're right, yeah. And then it's sort of a weird mirror of that time, which sucks.
It really does. Yeah. And I saw Germ Lynn is in the book too. You know,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
love
yeah, yeah,
Germ.
yeah, yeah. Their poems I thought resembled the 70s a bit too. Um, their haikus, like they are short, but there's something like a little bit violent to them, and they're pretty raw, with like a little bit of humor. So I was happy to have them too.
Yeah. They're very witty. And Germ's
Mm-hmm.
from Florida too, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
Can we talk
yeah.
about Florida? You wrote a letter to Florida, I saw the other
I
day.
did, and Germ replied to it.
Oh, yeah?
Well, posted a comment, yeah. Uh, yeah, they said like, yeah, it's hard to call home right now. Um,
I know. I think I saw really bad statistics today, and I never thought I would be sad, like miss the days when Florida man was just like bringing baby alligators to Wendy's.
which
Now
I'm
Florida
sure
man
he's
is
still
doing so
doing.
much worse.
He's still doing it.
Yeah, that's true. That will never end.
Hmm.
And then you have your Manchester Parish series.
Yeah, so that's a whole world of cut up. So um, after I was basically done with Bent Book, uh, again, because of everything going on with race right now, and Black Lives Matter, and how white people are treating it or not treating it, and I started thinking about like whiteness or white privilege and my own relationship with race. Um, and I started thinking about my family's background. My dad's side of the family is from Jamaica, um, and our family has like always identified as white, um, especially visually. But a couple of years ago, I took the Ancestry DNA test, and it came back um, that I had like 15% African heritage, which would mean that my grandmother was definitely mixed. And then that set me off on a lot of research, and also a lot of research involving passing. And I think that is something that was definitely never talked about in my family, and going and looking at immigration logs, the census records, and it wasn't until the 30s really that my dad's side of the family was listed as white. Anything beforehand around like 1920, everyone was um, logged as Black, uh, African, or Negro. So that really changes the entire history and what you thought your history was. Because before that, I was told that we were Native American and German, which is that we both came up basically like 0% on the Ancestry um, results. So, anyways, I started thinking about that, and I started thinking about that complicated relationship, and how when I was addressing that uh, with my father, I did have like sort of hesitance with it, but I had hesitance with it because I know that racism existed within my family, um, and within his mother, who she's passed away since, but she was of mixed race, and her parents were of mixed. Both of them were of mixed race, and yet I remember, you know, racist things that were said. So it was like broaching that was a big thing that I had to do. Um, so I wanted to go back, and I logged back into Ancestry, and I pulled up all of the pictures of her cousins, her aunts, her uncle, her father, um, her mother, and grandmother. So I took all of them and I basically cut them all up. And I really wasn't sure why I was doing this, but I wanted to take them and their image, and then also my writing, um, which is very queer, and I wanted to combine them. And I thought of, the only thing that I had going through my mind was how race is often hushed upon, queerness is often hushed upon. And I wanted to just combine those and see what would happen. So I cut everything up and I started laying it out in my living room, and kind of a really jarring thing happened the first time that I did it. Everything, it's like it was spelling out rape. Like, it was one of the pictures, which was like a great aunt of mine who was mixed race, has said um, like I took a hanger and everything ended well. One was talking about like feeling shame looking into the mirror. Another one on another woman's, it said, a crowd of men formed around me. Like, everything seemed violent, and I did like stop like at some point, because I really felt like something was like coming through a little bit. Like I almost felt like something was trying to like tell me something. And then I thought of the mixed race in my family, and I thought of slavery in Jamaica, like during the 1800s, and how rape is a part of that. So I felt like it was something was like coming through a little bit, and I just thought about this mixture of like sex and violence and race, and how my family is literally, I mean, and so like so many other families, but like my family is a direct result of those three things, and I am a direct result of those three things. So I wanted to like get it its due. And then what I also realized was, I think why these images felt very heavy was, if you even look at like a person of mixed race or a person of color, without even words on it, I feel like there's just so much more context. So if you have this added context and then you put like heavy queer words on top of that, it felt very strong. So I got all of these cut ups printed, and I named it Manchester Parish because that's where my family sort of from Jamaica originated from. I believe going back to like the 1700s, they eventually, I think, went to Kingston, but it's sort of like all this mixture, as far back as I can research, started in Manchester Parish. So I wanted to do this as like an ode to them in a way, because I think there's a lot that's been forgotten and not shared, and I think not purposely shared, especially from the elders. And then I think about the subject of passing in the United States. And yeah, if there was a cousin who was identifying as Black that didn't have the choice to even pass as white, I don't know about them. And I found out about them through Ancestry and through other people and through emailing, and talking to other relatives that have basically been saying the same thing. So that's been like my own process. And then I also am donating, I'm donating everything from the Manchester Parish prints to this place called House of Gigi, which is in Little Rock, Arkansas, and it was founded by Miss Major Griffin Gracie, who is a Black trans activist who's had like quite a bit of fame, but it's also the only sort of historical establishment that's dedicated to trans people, and it's in the South. And I think that's where the money should go, especially because it's in Arkansas. So that was another thing of like kind of combining what's going on right now with my own art and hopefully being helpful with it.
That's amazing, Jason. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I'm sure that was an earful.
That's amazing. And I think that's so important right now though, and that you like doing this personal journey and like looking into your personal ancestry, because look at all of these things you discover and all of those lines, there's like so much trauma in all of our heritages. And
Hmm.
I feel like going back and like you said, it seems like it's like speaking or what the ancestors want this to be known, it's like part of them
Hmm.
being heard.
Yeah.
And like I think that's the only way. So much, especially in the States, has been erased either intentionally or for like reasons because people were trying to survive or whatever. And you know it needs to come up. I can't help but like think of this whole moment like very psychoanalytically and think of it as like, when an individual has symptoms, first the symptom is like a little like, hey, something's going on, and you're just kind of like, no, you just keep going, keep surviving, and eventually it just like hits you in the face and it's like you have to stop and figure out what's going on because things aren't right. And so you have to like pay attention and like learn about yourself and listen to yourself so you can like move forward in a healthier new way. And I feel like
Yeah.
we all have to do that like collectively, and by
Hmm.
looking into our individual lines that can help heal those kind of uh, trauma lines, at least these small ones, while we work on like the greater collective.
And like maybe helping the small, if there's enough people helping those small lines, maybe that will open up, or hope, like I don't see how it couldn't open up to something bigger, because there's a lot of those small little lines and everyone has them.
Yeah, and that's how like my friend Langston Khan, who's also queer and Black, mixed race, and he also talks about, from a shamanic perspective, that's really what it's all about, is kind of healing the ancestors' trauma and like looking at it and healing it within yourself because we're all still carrying it. So it's like taking a more holistic view of the situation and working with it in a different way rather than just like the mainstream white Western worldview
Hmm.
that's like been placed upon everybody.
Hmm.
I've also been on an ancestry journey. Caitlin, and she did the paintings for two decks with this wonderful author, artist, diviner, wonderful woman, Tiana Lee McQuiller, and Tiana did a Sybil's Oraculum deck, which Caitlin did the paintings for, which is all about how the Sibyls were like from Africa, and then basically all the oracles in ancient times were African, and she wanted them to have more recognition, basically. And then the more recent deck is the Hoodoo Tarot, so it's like a lot of Hoodoo practitioners, and she does ancestor readings with the Hoodoo Tarot to kind of help you if there's any ancestors in your
Oh, I've
line.
seen your post on that, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if there's any ancestors in your line, she can kind of help use that tarot to like see what they're trying to say, or like if somebody's trying to get your attention to work with you. And I found it
Hmm.
really amazing. And after having the reading with her, I reopened my ancestry.com account too, and just been like, it's amazing all the photos that are in there, finding all these old photos and like articles, like my great grandparents died in a fire, and you found like I found the articles about the fire in there and that sort of thing.
Yeah. It's sort of it reframes a lot.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just like makes things make a bit more sense from what also I was told growing up.
Yeah, also from like what you're told, but I think, I mean, from my perspective at least, it also like explains behavior. Like it explains a lot of behavior. And I think on that side of my family, something that I've always discussed is there's always just been a lot of secrecy. Like secrecy is it's like it's like almost tangible. Like it's, and I think now, like really looking back, um yeah, I see why there would be secrecy if you are writing out your history. Like
Mm-hmm.
your entire sort of like being in an everyday world, if you are passing, is secrecy. So for me, it was like, I think that behavioral trait like just kind of kept getting passed on um until, you know, the ancestry DNA, for like all of like what it is, it really did kind of like blow the lid off quite a few things. And it is also like reframing people's histories. And what I really like about it is it's doing it with like uh, data. And I think like that is, if you're trying to bring like receipts to someone, that's the best way to do it.
Yeah, that's a
So,
really good point. And I've noticed a lot of people have been told this, like we have Native American ancestors in America. And
mhm.
I've been thinking about that. That might be like some sort of like guilt where people are trying to like be like, oh well, they're in our family too. We're not the people that massacred everyone. I don't know. It seems like some sort of white guilt
Yeah,
thing. I'm not
yeah,
sure.
yeah. What, what was funny, I mean, was I grew up always believing that I had Native American ancestry. I mean, I remember for like school projects, I would like present it to the class. I mean, in fourth grade, I remember doing a presentation saying that I was from the Creek and the Cherokee like tribes, when none of it, like in actuality, none of it was true. And like the funny thing is that after Ancestry, well, then I thought about it. Um, if my family didn't even come to the United States until the 30s, how were we Native American? Like we weren't even here to be Native American. So it was, um, yeah, it really does
Mm-hmm.
reframe quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I find it really interesting that it's all kind of that we're getting all this information at this point in history, um, so that people can kind of have these reckonings. Um, yeah. Anyway, I think that's amazing work. So thank you for
Well, thank
sharing.
you.
And I bought 4 of the
I
Manchester
know they're
Parish
on their way.
because what I'm going to do, they are so powerful though. When I read them, I was like, these are incredible. Like they are incredible cut ups with the photos of your ancestors, which are incredible photos of like such beautiful people. And yeah, they're just incredible. So I'm going to keep one perfectly preserved, and then I'm going to put the other sets in my cut ups. So then
Cool.
your cut ups are
Oh,
going to be
that's
in my
so
cut ups
cool.
now.
Yeah, yeah, that's really cool. I like that.
Yeah, and I had the same idea. I started saving the pictures from Ancestry.com on my desktop so that I could start printing out pictures of my ancestors and putting them into the collages as well.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a way to like keep them alive, but then also give them new meaning, and power too.
Yeah, exactly. And I love old images, vintage images anyway. So it's like they might as well have this kind of extra charge, personal meaning.
Hmm.
I've also built an ancestor altar all the way back in that corner of the room
Ooh,
where I've been hanging up Carl's and my ancestors, both family members and then like friends that had passed away.
that's
And that's
cool.
been really nice too to have a place for them in the house.
Hmm. Yeah, I like that.
I do too. Was there anything else you want to talk about? Last time we talked about Love Case. Should we give it a mention?
I don't know if I have any left.
Oh, they gone?
Um,
That's cool.
yeah, well, I think I have like 2 or 3 left. I mean, I could always reprint them, but yeah, I mean, it's funny. Like I did Love Case in 2018, and then last year I did this project called Locked Up Boy, which was basically just my journal. And the artist Zach Greer hand wrote them. So it was like this weird like transfer of information to him that went to the page that I was really into.
Ooh.
And now I have Bent Book, which is like featuring others. And I like that I'm choosing to sort of go that route, to like have other voices get out there, or just like be in the open. I like this idea of putting other people's voices out into the world. It's very it's like very satisfying.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
And you were in rendering.
Yeah, which is also featuring a bunch of voices too.
Yeah, I like it too. Even the podcast, it's like a bunch of different voices. And I like that we have the tools that we can do that, and that we can print these kinds of things or put them online and not have to go through these kind of middlemen who decide what's the editors of the world's culture who decide what's worthy and what's going to go out there and in what form. I feel like
Right.
we're getting to see so much, how much more interesting people are than we've been seeing for a long time, and how much diversity there is, and how creative people are, and weird. I love how weird everyone is.
Yeah, me too.
Nice. Oh, cool. That was fun.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Of course. Anytime.
Yeah.
I love my bent book.
Yeah. Well, it looks nice.
It's really nice. Who did the cover?
Oh, so Melissa Diaz
Oh,
did the
of
cover.
course it's Melissa.
Yeah, but like she actually didn't do the cover. She like had some strokes of paint that she had on a piece of paper that she had up in her apartment for like 3 years or something. And then I saw them last spring and I was like, hey, can I take this? And she was like, yeah, it's sort of just been sitting here. So then I that's the cover. So
That's amazing.
yeah.
Yeah, but she's so genius that way.
Mm-hmm.
I have to thank Melissa, because when we all lived together and I was stressed out, she was like, here, make art. And she like put paints in my hand. And even though my mom was an artist and all my friends were artists and I always love artists, I never really like let myself be an artist. And then Melissa like put these paints in my hand. She was like, this will help. And I started just going like swirls and doing nothing with it. And I was like, this does help. I like this. And I've been doing it ever since. So thank you, Melissa.
Yeah, I have a lot to thank her for too.
Yeah, she's a treat.
Also, last thing though, if anyone wanted to purchase Bent Book or Manchester Parish, they could either go to it's bentbook.bigcartel.com, or you just go through my Instagram page, which is just Hoffwit.
Yeah, I will link to everything, and I'll also put those foundations, links to them, so people can see what they are, because they all sound really amazing.
Okay, cool.
Thank you for listening to Rendering Unconscious. You've just heard a discussion with Jason Haaf, a writer and editor living in Brooklyn, New York. His latest work, Bent Book, as well as the Manchester Parish series, are available now. Links to everything can be found in the text accompanying this episode. Follow him on Instagram at Haafwit, Haafwit, on Instagram. You can support the podcast by visiting our Patreon, patreon.com/VANESSA23CARL. Your support is greatly appreciated. And now, Fetishize Immediacy, from the just-released album Switching Mirrors, available from Highbrow Lowlife and Tripart Editions. or to allow for, however, and the other, to voyeurism, ray of sunshine, things to, force that gives it body. The words come, they did not seem, place where desire is, progression, opening doors, nothing kills desire, becoming formless, we call them, libido, I have a dream, wanting or not wanting, the story of our fetishized immediacy, to know anything in we didn't know existed. Tarot is the in an act of speaking, with choice, investigation of what is at this, knowledge, folds in on, of the working, and see what needs to be done further.